Good day to everybody. My name is Denzil Celestine Dcosta. I'm the lecturer at the Department of Hospitality Science, Milagros College, Mangalore. Today we are going to discuss on the topic faults in bread. First we'll see what do you mean by faults in bread. It's nothing but when the final product of bread that comes out, if there are any mistakes in the final product which are clearly visible, these are called as faults in bread. So today we will go towards the first fault in bread, that is flying top. Now what do you mean by flying top? As the picture suggests, the top of the bread, that is the crust of the bread, is risen above the required level and is separated from the main body of the bread. What are the causes and what should have been the correction? Now there is no correction what can be done afterwards. We are going to see what can be done, okay, for correcting this. First we'll see what is the cause. Cause is one can be underproofed bread. The correction is proof to the correct height. What do you mean by proofing? Proofing is the raising content, how the bread is risen. Okay, so that is proofing. Next one is cold dough. The cause can be a cold dough. Now when you're making the dough, if you use too cold water, the yeast doesn't work properly, it doesn't get time to activate properly. So what is the correction that can be done? Increasing water temperature. That is the correction that can be done. Next cause, too much yeast. When you add too much yeast, the yeast works more. There is more yeast in the dough, so it rises more and the top splits. So obviously the correction will be check the correct level of yeast, add the right amount of yeast. Then flour too strong. Now if the flour has higher protein content, the elasticity will be more, thus again the top can come out of the major section of the bread. Now check the quality of flour as required. Now as we know, we need around 10 to 14% of the strength of protein for a bread, so preferably go for that quality of flour. Then over mixing. What do you mean by over mixing? Over mixing is when you mix the bread too much than the required consistency. If the gluten is stretched and again you keep on mixing, okay, the gluten starts getting weaker and there are chances when baking the gluten breaks and the top comes off. Then too much premix. Premix is the content where you mix it previously, okay, the matter what is there, or the flour, the sugar, all that, when you mix it too much or you mix and keep it for a long time, it doesn't give out a good quality of bread and this can cause. The next point is adding of too much improver. Now the improver, if it is added too much, what happens here? Okay, again the bread not only gets over fluffy and the fluffiness will lose the strength to hold the top of the bread. That is the last cause of the flying top. Next we are going to the next fault is too much volume. Now what is too much volume? The size of the bread. Now let's say we use standard maybe 300 grams of dough to prepare one loaf of bread, or 500 grams of dough to prepare one loaf of bread. Now for that same content of dough, if the bread is coming out of the tin and it is too much size, if the volume increases, there is something which is wrong. So here are the causes. Overproofed. So we know, as we discussed in the previous topic, what is overproofing. Too much yeast. Overscaling. Overscaling is you don't weigh the dough properly, you don't weigh the what you can tell as the final product that is to be kept properly. Okay, incorrect premix, incorrect flour used, and too much improver. This is the same as the previous point, so there's nothing to discuss in this point. So we'll move on to the next what you can tell as fault is too dark crust color. As you can see in the picture, the crust color is too dark or burnt. What is the reason? Okay, first one, oven temperature is too high. If the oven temperature is high, again, obviously the exterior will be burnt very easily. Too much premix is maybe because of too much of sugar, too less of salt. All this renders to this burnt top. Next, flour with high enzyme activity. Now, when the enzyme activity is more, yes, there are more chemicals that are released. Now, because of this chemical release, what happens to the bread is it turns darker colors. So this is also the reason. Too much sugar. As we all know, sugar is a base carbohydrate. Now, because of this carbohydrate being more, now what is the last product of sugar is carbon. So when sugar is heated and reaches a certain amount of time, it changes its color from brown to black. So this can be one of the cause. And too much of salt. Now, if too much of salt is added, also there is chances of burning very fast because it's a crystal. Okay, when these crystals are added, yes, the dough stops working and it starts burning. Okay, so this is all about this next topic, that is too dark crust color. Okay, next we will go to is uneven crumb texture. What do you mean by this uneven crumb texture? Okay, the texture of the external crumb or the exterior of the bread is very uneven. There are ups and downs, there are bumps. It is not smooth, it is not fine. So that is also one of the fault in the bread. Now, how can it this be caused? First one is too soft dough. If the dough has been very soft, if it is not as the desired consistency, the unevenness can come. Dough is too cold, yes, as we know, if the water cold water is used, also this unevenness is come. No resting time. If the dough is not rested properly, the what you can tell as the fermentation doesn't take place properly, that dough will not stretch properly. If the stretch is not there, the baking will not take in a even pace and thus causing a uneven crumb. Too little fat or improvers. If very little fat is added, again, yes, fat needs is needed in the bread dough to give a smooth or a sheen finish to a bread. Okay, so too little fat also is one of the cause. Then too little premix, that is your sugar, salt and other contents. So next we go to the next topic is too low volume. As you can see in the picture, the volume of the bread is very less. As we know, if the what you can tell as dough is weighed, let's say maybe 200 or 300 or 400 grams as for all the doughs, if the volume is less, what is the problem here? We'll see the cause. Undermixed. If the dough is not kneaded properly, the fermentation doesn't take place properly, thus giving you this final product. Underproofed. Yes, again, proofing is not done properly. Weak flour. Okay, if weak flour is used, the protein content is very less in this weak flour. Now, what happens in this weak flour? Because of protein content being very less, okay, the dough doesn't get activated, the proteins in the dough doesn't get activated, thus giving you a very less strength in flour for it to rise. Okay, next is incorrect premix level, as that is a common topic. If you don't add the products, that is sugar, salt, what you can tell as yeast correctly, this can cause. Then too little improver. Now again, why is improver used? Improvers are used to give the dough a nice rise. Okay, now if too little improvers are used or required quantity improvers are not used, what happens here is it doesn't give the proper rise. Okay, so we'll go to the next topic, that is blisters on the crust. Now, what do you mean by blisters? Blisters doesn't mean wounds. Blisters means the crust flaking off or the crust having small bumps on top of it. Okay, just the skin part of the crust is having an aeration. Now, what are the causes? Here, a little more causes are there. First one is under fermented dough. If the dough is not fermented properly, during the process of baking, the yeast activates more and these globules are formed. Then, overproofed, if the bread is kept for proofing more than what it is required, yes, the yeast works more and these blisters takes place. Then excessive steam in proofer. Now, during the proofing process, if there is more steam, there are chances of the out exterior looking very soggy, and once it is being baked, this sogginess turns into bubbles. This can cause blisters on the bread. Then over mixing, that is, yes, mixing of the dough. Under mixing, obviously, if you don't mix the dough properly. Too little improver, if you don't add proper improvers. Next point is too little premix, that is adding of salt, sugar and other items. Then too little salt, yes, again, if you add less amount of salt, the yeast will be going on activating, it will not render the what you can tell as yeast inactive. Okay, so thus too little salt. Okay, so I will end with these points for today. In the next topic we will discuss the other faults. Thank you, one and all.